And so this is review for those of you that saw the video, and it's a preview for those that missed yesterday. Wasn't yesterday, Saturday, huh? Okay, Syamantaka Jewel. The chapter 56 opens with Satrajit worshipping the sun or the sun god. And I'm going to go quickly, not narrate the whole story because of time. He did hours of worship every day and mantras and gifts and many things. One day, as you see that outside the city of Dwarka, the distance is the city of Dwarka, Suryadev came, descended, and gave a gift to Satrajit. The effulgence of this jewel was as brilliant as the sun, and it gave to the worshipper 170 pounds of gold every day, and this becomes important for chapter 57. Good health and longevity and all those nice things for people who worship the sun. And Satrajit was very happy. You knew my heart. You gave me just what I wanted. And he then fastened the jewel on a chain, golden chain presumably, and went to visit Dwarka. When he came to visit Dwarka, the residents of Dwarka thought that the sun god himself had come to visit Krishna. But he didn't come to visit Krishna. He walked right past Krishna's palace. And Krishna said, that's not the sun god, that's Satrajit. And the effulgence that you see is the jewel, it's not the sun god. So he set up an altar, installed the Syamantaka Jewel for worship without inviting Krishna. Krishna understood his pride, and he requested Satrajit to come visit him. And Krishna made the request, all valuable things such as this should be given to the king. Please give it to the king. Satrajit refused, and that was a mistake. So his brother, Satrajit had a brother named Krsna, one day took the jewel wearing upon his neck, went into the forest wearing for hunting, and you see up on the rock, up on the right side, that's a giant lion. The lion saw the jewel and saw Krsna, saw the horse. He jumped from the rock there, pounced on Krsna and the horse, killed them both, and took the jewel. Now what's the lion going to do with the jewel? Well, he put it around his neck, and he went for a little stroll, and he ended up just outside Jambavan's cave. And he was roaring, and Jambavan heard the nurse crying for help for her son, for his son. So he went and confronted the lion and said, "Lion, get out of here." And the lion pounced on him, and Jambavan finished him. Because Jambavan's very powerful. Now, Jambavan has the jewel, and he doesn't have any need for wealth and glittery things, so he gave it to his little son to play with. And what else happened? What else happened is, meanwhile, back in Dwarka, Satrajit was anxious about his brother not returning, And he did what some people do. He started a rumor that Krishna must have taken the jewel from Krsna and killed my brother. And the rumor spread. And Krishna heard the rumor. Whenever you start rumors, you can be sure. Just be sure. The person who's being spoken about, not whether you started, but it's the person who's being spoken about is going to hear. Be sure about it. It's just how it is. So Krishna heard. What did Krishna do? He was being maligned and falsely accused. So he decided he would stand by the truth. He took some village elders. Who went with him to the forest to find out the jewel. And sure enough, they found the dead horse, the dead Krsna, and a dead lion outside the cave of Jambavan. So they decided what to do. Krishna said, I'll go into the cave and find out where the jewel is. And they tried to persuade him, no, don't go, or we'll go with you. Krishna said, I'll go alone. Just stay by the mouth of the cave. He went into the cave, and there was, sure enough, as we see, when Krishna entered, the nurse cried out. Jambavan came in the mood of protecting his son. He didn't even recognize that it was Krishna. And a big fight with clubs and thises and that's took place between Krishna and Jambavan for 28 days and nights non-stop. Pretty intense. And at the end of the 28 days, Jambavan's huge muscles were being beaten by Krishna. He considered, who can be stronger than me except Rama? Remembering those old thoughts, Jambavan became astonished and concluded this must be his lord. And so what did Jambavan do? He fell at Krishna's feet. Krishna rubbed his aching muscles with his hand, and everything became nice again. And he then offered prayers to Krishna and with profuse apologies and said, let me give you the jewel and let me give you my jewel-like daughter. Because that's Krishna said, I've come just because this reason, that reason. I need the jewel to show that I didn't take the jewel and give it to Ugrasena. Can you give me the jewel? So he gave his daughter. This is wife number 2, because previous was Rukmini's marriage. So he gave the hand of his daughter to Krishna's hand and the jewel to Krishna's hand. And right there in the cave, they were married in a little simple procedure. And they went back to Dwarka. Now Krishna has wife number 2, Satyabhama. Excuse me, not Satyabhama. Jambavati. Jambavan and Jambavati. And when they came back, the citizens of Dwarka had just finished a puja to goddess, doesn't give her name. And just after the puja was done, Krishna showed up. They were very happy. Krishna called to the royal assembly there in Dwarka for Satrajit to come. Then we see Krishna on one side, Ugrasena in the center in a large seat. And he presented the jewel to Satrajit in the front of the assembly. So it wasn't I that took the jewel, and the whole story became known. So Satrajit went back to his place and was very concerned. He was concerned for 2 reasons. 1, he offended Krishna. And 2, people are going to give him a problem because he offended Krishna. So he wanted to get that off his back. So he decided he should give the jewel and give his daughter, Satyabhama, Satrajit's daughter, is Satyabhama. And Krishna gave the jewel back, accepted Satyabhama as his wife. So now he has queen number 3. So Rukmini, Jambavati, and Satyabhama. And the story ends with Satrajit holding the jewel. And then comes the question, what or who is the real jewel? So they're both real, but Satyabhama is the best. And that's a quick review of chapter 57, which opens the door for 56, for 57. Satrajit was murdered, and the jewel was returned. So, where was Krishna anyway when all this was going on? When Satrajit was murdered? After this Syamantaka Jewel incident happened, around the same time is when the Pandavas were thought to be dead. When the House of Lac event took place, is Krishna's in Dwarka. The Pandavas are thought to be dead. And so Krishna and Balarama, although omniscient, they went to attend the funeral for Kunti and the Pandavas. So that's where the chapter 57 begins. Although Lord Govinda was fully aware of what had actually occurred when he heard reports that the Pandavas and Queen Kunti had been burned to death, he went with Lord Balarama to the kingdom of the Kurus to fulfill the family obligations expected of him. That is, to attend the funeral. Krishna understood the facts, since he is the controller of the senses, Govinda. He is the antaryami of all beings, so he knew very well what the real story was, but he went anyways. There's a pastime that's unfolding. He went because of family obligations. The word Rama suggests they actually went to please the devotees. Govinda means that he protects the cows. This suggests that he is affectionate to his devotees. Thus he went for protecting the Pandavas. Now he didn't need to protect the Pandavas because they're under his jurisdiction in any case, but he went. And the two lords met with Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona. Showing sorrow equal to theirs, they cried out, "Alas, how painful this is." Commentary reads, Bhishma is described with Vidura, or Sa Viduram, since they had similar desires, or were both devotees of Krishna. The others are in the order that they met on the path. The two lords, as well as Vidura, who also knew the truth, imitated grief like others. Gathering with them, they all cried loudly. No, how did Vidura know? He's not omniscient. Krishna and Balarama are omniscient. But it was Vidura who knew even before the House of Lac happened that it was going to happen, because he had privileges in the royal family. He heard the story. The plan even to build the House of Lac and then to send the Pandavas there for some outing and then to burn the House of Lac. So what did Vidura do? You know the story. Vidura spoke something just as the Pandavas were leaving that was like a riddle that no one could understand except Yudhisthira. And later Kunti asked, what did he say? And he said that there's a plan to kill us by fire. And we will be able to escape from that murderous situation by a tunnel. So when they got to the House of Lac, there was a nice place by the side of a river, etc., in a village nearby. Somebody was sent by Vidura, who was very skilled at building tunnels. So from the center of the house down in the direction of the river, he dug a tunnel. And that was the escape route. And then Vidura sent a message, it's going to be tonight. They're going to attempt to kill you. That's so you should, it was a messenger. And so they attended the festival, they came back, and they went to take rest, but they didn't take rest, they went through the tunnel. And when they went on the other side of the tunnel, they got to the river, and when they got to the river, there was a boatman waiting, who was Vidura, and took him across the river. And so when went inside the House of Lac, there were some guests that spent the night. Providential arrangement. A mother and her 5 sons. So when the house burned and they found the bones of the mother and the 5 sons, everyone thought, oh, that's Kunti and the Pandavas. So they had a big funeral. But Vidura knew. And we'll hear something more about what happened when that happened tomorrow. Stay tuned. Nice description of those details. So they're back, Krishna and Balaram, are in Hastinapur, attending a funeral for persons they knew that weren't dead, and grieving as if they were dead. Taking advantage of this opportunity while they were away from Dwarka, Akrura and Kritavarma went to Shatta Dhanva and said, why not take the Syamantaka Jewel? So another conspiracy. But this was a retaliation conspiracy to take the jewel. But along with taking the jewel, they hinted, they didn't directly say, in addition to taking the jewel, you should take his life, but they hinted at it. Satrajit promised his jewel-like daughter to us. Here's the get-back reason. Both Satrajit made the promise of giving his daughter in marriage, Satyabhama, to both Akrura and Kritavarma. So they're saying he promised his jewel-like daughter to us, but then gave her to Krishna instead, contemptuously neglecting us. Now they weren't unhappy that Krishna married her, but they were mad at Satrajit that he promised us and then he went back against his word. So why should Satrajit not follow his brother's path? They just hinted at it. Prasena was killed. Why not Satrajit follow his brother's path? So then comes this question. How can 2 exalted persons, particularly Akrura, be involved in a murder plot? It's a puzzle. Akrura and Kritavarma are exalted, pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. Some of you have been to Vrindavan, and at Akrura Ghat, there's a nice temple where Akrura Ji is worshipped, along with the side of Krishna and Balaram. Akrura, when entering Vrindavan on behalf of Kamsa, just seeing the footprints of Krishna, he fell out of the chariot and rolled in the dust worshipping the dust and the feet of Krishna and Balarama. And they met just outside of Vrindavan, and then on his way back to Mathura, he had the darshan of Lord Narayana reclining on the bed of Anantashesh, as you see in the painting there. On the chariot, there's Krishna and Balaram. You know the story, right? Anyone not know the story? Everyone knows the story. You don't? Okay. On their way back, Akrura is driving the chariot, right? And riding in the back of the chariot are Krishna and Balaram. So on the way from Vrindavan to Mathura, Krishna and Balaram requested to take bath in the Jamuna before entering Mathura, sacred bath. So he stopped the chariot, they took their bath. They got back on their chariot, and Akrura asked, "May I have permission? May I also take bath?" So when he went to take bath, he saw, as you see in the painting here, he saw the Supreme Lord reclining on Anantashesh. And very surprised. He looked back, there were Krishna and Balaram sitting there waiting. So he understood this Anantashesh is not different than Balaram, and Lord Narayana is not different than Krishna. So he had this wonderful experience, a vision of the non-difference between Shesha and Narayana and Krishna and Balaram, or Balaram and Krishna. So he's a very special person. Here's a family tree, and you see he's often called uncle, but he's a little bit even beyond just an uncle. Here's Akrura up here. He is the son of Shwapalka. This becomes important in this chapter 57, because Shwapalka was celebrated, in fact, by his presence, rain came and good health came. And so Akrura, being the son of Shwapalka, is known for those same characteristics. But Shwapalka and Chitrarat, they were brothers, and here it shows there's 7 descendants, followed by Shurasena. And Shurasena was the father. Who was Shurasena the father of? Nanda Maharaj, through a Vaishya wife, and it doesn't show the rest, but through that Vaishya wife, Nanda Maharaj, there were other children, Vasudeva, 9 other sons, Kunti, and 4 other daughters. So Shurasena had lots of children, mostly male. So Vasudeva and Kunti, Vasudeva and Kunti were brother and sister. And so that makes Krishna his son of Vasudeva, and Kunti's children, the Pandavas, as first cousins. So often Akrura is spoken of as uncle, but as you see, there's a little bit, so he's pretty old, Akrura, compared to Krishna. And here's a detail. Here's Ugrasena, and Devaki, who's pictured over here, they're not exactly brother and sister. Devaki was the daughter of Devaka, and Ugrasena's son was Kamsa. So they weren't exactly, Kamsa and Devaki were not brother and sister, but first cousins. And the others, but they're from the same lineage from the Vrishni dynasty, the Andaka and Vrishni dynasty. Okay, so that's a little bit about Akrura. So he's a pure devotee. Why this bad behavior? And the answer the Acharyas give is, this is Jiva Goswami in his Krama Sandarbha. It's a commentary, verse-by-verse commentary on the entire Bhagavatam. Akrura, great devotee of the Lord, spoke in this way because of the anger of the people in Gokula upon him. The anger of the people upon Akrura was specifically the gopis, pictured here. They cursed Akrura that he should have to undergo separation from Krishna just as they had to undergo separation from Krishna. Now, it doesn't say that he should be involved in a murder plot, but the murder plot was part of his separation from Krishna. That was the reason why, given by Jiva Goswami, why he spoke this way. And Kritavarma had associated with Kamsa. Although he was an elevated Vaishnava, through association he had become contaminated. Both of them being members of the Bhoja dynasty, and thus Kritavarma was now suffering from this undesirable association. So those are the two influences on Akrura and Kritavarma. And sure enough, just at the hint, why not Satrajit have the same consequence or outcome as his brother Prasena? So sure enough, when Shatta Dhanva, who agreed to do the dirty work, his mind, thus influenced by their advice, wicked Shatta Dhanva murdered Satrajit in his sleep simply out of greed. Now his greed was the jewel. He wanted the jewel for himself. And murdering was just part of his greed and part of this influence by that bad advice or bad hint. In this way, the sinful Shatta Dhanva shortened his own lifespan. Now, when he did this, apparently, there were ladies, women in Satrajit's palace that saw the whole thing, and they screamed and wept. Shatta Dhanva took the jewel and left like a butcher after he has killed some animals. And Sanatana Goswami, in his commentary, writes that this shows the wickedness of Shatta Dhanva. He didn't even care about the crying and screaming of the women. He just took the jewel and left. Next morning, when Satyabhama saw her dead father, she was plunged into grief, lamenting, my father, oh, I am killed." She fell unconscious. Now remember, she's married to Krishna, but Krishna's out of town. Krishna went to attend a funeral of the Pandavas and Kunti, even though they hadn't been killed and he knew it. But everyone else thought they had. And in Jiva Goswami's commentary, he writes, Satyabhama's anguished feelings and words at the death of her father were prompted by Krishna's pastime potency, Leela Shakti, to prepare for the Lord's violent reaction against Shatta Dhanva. Jiva Goswami often uses this Leela Shakti term where we would commonly say Yogamaya. Exactly the corresponding, are they one and the same? I've not been able to find any clear delineation between the two. There seem to be like interchangeable. Like Leela Shakti is a subpotency of Yogamaya, is the best I can understand. But they're practically interchangeable. So her intense expressions are setting the ground for Krishna's actions with Shatta Dhanva. Queen Satyabhama put her father's corpse in a large vat of oil to preserve it for the funeral when Krishna came back, and went to Hastinapur, where she sorrowfully told Lord Krishna, who was already aware of the situation, about her father's murder. This very sad time, the Pandavas and Kunti gone, apparently, and now Satyabhama's father. But Satyabhama's father had made an offense against Krishna. He just got a reaction for his offense against Krishna. When Lord Krishna and Lord Balarama heard this news, O king, they exclaimed, "Alas! This is the greatest tragedy for us." Thus, imitating the ways of human society, they lamented, their eyes brimming with tears. You can look closely, you can see both of them with tears in their eyes. Jiva Goswami writes, though the two lords were above the material world, they followed the customs of mankind, Nrit Lokatam, by weeping because of separation from relatives, because of the pastimes. Doing otherwise would have looked extremely unsuitable. So they kept with the norm and cried. Text 10. The Supreme Lord returned to his capital with his wife and elder brother. After arriving in Dwaraka, he readied himself to kill Shatta Dhanva because it was known. It wasn't like it wasn't a question about who was the murderer. There were ladies that saw it. He readied himself to kill Shatta Dhanva and retrieve the jewel from him. Text 11. Upon learning that Lord Krishna was prepared to kill him, Shatta Dhanva was struck with fear. To save his life, he approached Kritavarma and begged him for help. But Kritavarma replied as follows: I dare not offend the Supreme Lords, Krishna and Balarama. Indeed, how can one who troubles them expect any good fortune? Kamsa and all his followers lost both their wealth and their life because of enmity toward them. And after battling them 17 times, Jarasandha was left without even a chariot. 17 times. He destroyed his entire army. So many soldiers. We gave the list previously, how many horses and chariots and elephants and infantry and so many. And they were all killed. Even his chariot and chariot driver, except Jarasandha standing alone on the battlefield. Very humiliating. So I'm not going to mess with Krishna and Balaram. They're almighty. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Kritavarma told Shatta Dhanva, indeed, I instigated you to murder Satrajit, but not out of enmity towards Krishna. However, if you do not want to surrender to Krishna, why should I follow you and also go against the Lord? So, what did Shatta Dhanva do? Kritavarma said no, he went to Akrura and begged him for protection. But Akrura similarly told him, who would oppose the two personalities of Godhead if he knew their strength? And then for several verses he glorifies both lords. It is the Supreme Lord who creates, maintains, and destroys this universe simply as his pastime. The cosmic creators cannot even understand his purpose, bewildered as they are by his illusory Maya. As a child of 7, Krishna uprooted an entire mountain and held it aloft as easily as a young boy picks up a mushroom. I offer my respectful obeisances to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, whose every deed is amazing. He is the Supreme Soul, the unlimited source and fixed center of all existence. There's a very nice chapter in 10th canto. After Krishna returns to Mathura, several things happen. He makes a promise when they reach Mathura, he would visit Akrura at his home. So it happened later. Sometime, like after he went to school for Sandipani Muni school and came back. There's a whole section, almost a whole chapter, where there's the exchange between Akrura and Krishna. And it's very nice, very beautiful, very eloquent prayers, offering his prayers to Krishna as the personality of Godhead. He very clearly, Akrura, understands, unlike the residents of Vrindavan that don't understand that Krishna is the personality of Godhead, he clearly understood. It is a puzzle, other than the curse of the gopis, how he could be implicated in a murder plot. So Shatta Dhanva was turned down by the two that he thought could help him. So what did he do? His appeal thus rejected by Akrura, also Shatta Dhanva placed the precious jewel in Akrura's care. Didn't give it to him, but you hold on to it, and fled on a horse that could travel 100 yojanas, 800 miles. Now the distance from where they were in Dwarka and 800 miles away is very close to Mithila, the capital of, where King Janak ruled during Ramachandra's time. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Shatta Dhanva left the jewel with Akrura, but he did not give it to him as he had extreme possessiveness of the jewel. The quality of the horse was its ability to run for hundreds of yojanas, in fact 100. In emergency, it will also be seen that because of the difficulty in going all the way from Dwarka to Mithila, the horse died. I think you should take your son. He's a nice boy. But he died. So now, text 19. Krishna and Balaram mounted Krishna's chariot, which flew the flag of Garuda, and was yoked with tremendously swift horses, and pursued their elder's murderer. Now, apparently Krishna's horses outlasted Shatta Dhanva's horse. In a garden on the outskirts of Mithila, the horse Shatta Dhanva was riding collapsed. Terrified, he abandoned the horse and began to flee on foot with Krishna in angry pursuit. So Krishna had better horses. And there we see at the bottom, there's Kritavarma running. There's his exhausted horse. As Shatta Dhanva fled on foot, the Supreme Lord, also going on foot, cut off his head with his sharp-edged disc. The Lord then searched Shatta Dhanva's upper and lower garments for the Syamantaka Jewel. No such luck, because he didn't have it. He left the jewel with Akrura. Not finding the jewel, Lord Krishna went to his elder brother and said, "We have killed Shatta Dhanva uselessly. The jewel isn't here." To this, Lord Balaram replied, now, At this particular point, Balaram and Krishna separate for 3 years. Balaram wishes, having come this far, to visit the palace of the king of Mithila. Indeed, Shatta Dhanva must have placed the jewel in the care of someone. You should return to our city and find that person. I wish to visit King Videha, who is most dear to me. O king, this is Shukadev speaking to King Parikshit. O king, having said this, Lord Balaram, the beloved descendant of Yadu, entered the city of Mithila. Jiva Goswami comments, this jewel has caused Krishna defamation and made him enter the cave. Although I know Akrura has similar desires for the jewel, Krishna did not give up partiality to him. This will create more rumors about him. Burning with grief, I cannot approach him. Thinking this way, Balaram then spoke with affectionate anger. He went to Mithila, though he should have gone back to Dwarka to give joy to the Yadus. Yadu, Nandana. Okay, so Balaram goes to Mithila. The king of Mithila immediately rose from his seat when he saw Lord Balaram approaching with great love. The king honored the supremely worshipable Lord by offering him elaborate worship as stipulated by scriptural injunctions. Text 26. The Almighty Lord Balaram stayed in Mithila for several years, honored by his affectionate devotee, Janaka Maharaj. Comment. Janaka Maharaj, because I became confused. This is, the pastimes of Krishna are not the same time as the pastimes of Ram. And the answer is, Janak Maharaj, during the time of Lord Ramachandra, was such a celebrated person that successive kings, whatever their name was, would also take the name Janaka. Like the king of Mithila became Janaka, just in honor of the original. During that time, Dhritarashtra's son, Duryodhana, learned from Balaram the art of fighting with a club. There you see the fighting between Bhima and Duryodhana, and in the background Krishna is watching. It shows Balaram with his plow there also watching, and other generals while that big battle was going on. And somehow there's another one of the mysteries. How is it that Balaram had affection for Duryodhana? It is a puzzle. And because Balaram, it's not that Balaram doesn't know the diabolical nature of Duryodhana. On the other hand, Duryodhana was very faithful and worshipful towards Balaram. And so that was reciprocated with. Although he knew he had affection and extended all kinds of seemingly privileged moods towards Duryodhana. It also, our acharyas explain, it enhanced the pastime when Duryodhana was finally killed. It's just added to the flavor of Krishna's pastimes. Therefore, he had this particular mood towards Duryodhana. Lord Keshava arrived in Dwarka. Now, the two have separated, Balaram and Krishna. And he came to Dwarka and described the demise of Shatta Dhanva and his own failure to find the Syamantaka Jewel. He spoke in a way that would please his beloved Satyabhama. Now Krishna is omniscient, so he knows who has the jewel in the whole thing. Lord Krishna then had the various funeral rites performed for his deceased relative, Satrajit. Satyabhama had placed his body in a vat of oil. For all this time he's in the vat of oil, preserved then, so he could do the funeral rites. The Lord attended the funeral along with well-wishers of the family. Then, when Akrura and Kritavarma, who had originally incited Shatta Dhanva to commit his crime, heard that he had been killed, they fled Dwarka in terror and took up residence elsewhere. Shatta Dhanva went one direction. Kritavarma went in a northerly direction, and Akrura went in an easterly direction. He went to the same place where he was born, his ancestral home, where his father Shwapalka had lived and became married where he was born. He took the jewel with him. The two previously believed that Shatta Dhanva would not be killed, since he was known as a Yadava. Now, hearing that he had been killed, they were even more terrified. They thought he would be, get cover because he was a relative. No. Text 30. In Akrura's absence, ill omens arose in Dwarka, and all the citizens began to suffer continually from physical and mental distresses, as well as from disturbances caused by higher powers and by creatures of the earth. Krishna's internal potency at work. And so another rumor started. This is rumor number 2 in 2 successive chapters, that Krishna did something bad, which he didn't do. So the bad thing that the rumor was, is he chased Akrura out of town. And Akrura, like his father Shwapalka, was thought to be wherever they would reside, there would be nice conditions of weather and health and so forth. But because Akrura's gone, now we have all these disturbances. So Krishna's the cause. And the commentary by our acharyas is this one: familiarity breeds contempt. Even with Krishna in Dwarka. So what to speak of our humble selves? We have to be very cautious about such a thing. A little sharing. In the Henry Street Temple in Brooklyn, where Prabhupada visited several times, I was one of my godbrothers, who now lives in Alachua, was at the Brooklyn Temple, and name is Kirtiraj. So Kirtiraj was requested, or he was given the offer, he told me, to become Prabhupada's personal servant, and he declined. The reason he declined is, he said, he saw that personal servant after personal servant after personal servant after personal servant had very severe spiritual difficulties, because being in such close proximity, that proximity or familiarity bred contempt. And so those persons fell. To get that service, they were very elevated devotees, at least outwardly. But in intimate association with Prabhupada, which should be something one would naturally desire, they had problems. And the problem is their contempt. They started considering Prabhupada ordinary or whatever, however, and fell from their position, in spiritual position. I had first-hand experience of one of those, and it was very disheartening. So when you don't have association, you want it. When you have association, you have to be careful, is the point. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Akrura took the Syamantaka Jewel and went to reside in the city of Benares, where he became known as Dhanapati, the master of charity, or Dhan, because he had 170 pounds of gold every day. So he gave in charity. There he executed fire sacrifices on gold altars with elaborate assemblies of qualified priests. That's where his father, because Shwapalka, there was a drought for a long time. And they requested Shwapalka to come reside there. And shortly after his residing there, rain came. So they contributed the rain coming to Shwapalka's presence. So the king gave his daughter in marriage to Shwapalka, and Akrura was their son. That's the history. Text 31. Some men proposed that the troubles were due to Akrura's absence, but they had forgotten the glories of the Supreme Lord, which they themselves had so often described. Indeed, how can calamities occur when a place where the personality Godhead, the residence of all sages, resides? But there were calamities or disturbances by Krishna's own arrangement for pastime's sake. Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, as a result of his offenses to the gopis of Vraja, by taking Krishna, Akrura had also had to experience many years of separation from Krishna and to live in Kashi among Krishna's enemies. As many years as Baladev stayed in Mithila, Akrura stayed in Kashi. Then Vishwanath goes on, hearing how he was giving charity to many brahmanas and doing sacrifices on an altar of gold, people began to gossip that Krishna had sent Akrura to Kashi. Vishwanath writes, to dispel this new and incredible stain on his reputation, Krishna created various calamities in Dwaraka, thus inducing citizens to call for Akrura's return. Text 32. The elders said, previously when Lord Indra had withheld rain from Kashi or Benares, the king of that city gave his daughter Gandhini to Shwapalka, who was then visiting him. It soon rained in the kingdom of Kashi. Wherever his equally powerful son Akrura stays, Lord Indra will provide sufficient rain. Indeed, that place will be free from miseries and untimely deaths. He's like a good luck charm or something. Hearing these words from the elders, Lord Janardana, though aware that the absence of Akrura was not the only cause of the evil omens, had him summoned back to Dwaraka and spoke to him. So now Krishna is omniscient. He's murdered his father-in-law. He has the Syamantaka Jewel. His absence was causing, at least externally, apparently, the real purpose, how can there be miseries where Krishna is present? So is his own potencies arranging. Here's what Krishna said. He greeted him confidentially and spoke pleasant words with him. Then the Lord, who was fully aware of Akrura's heart, by virtue of his being the knower of everything, smiled and addressed him. Oh, Master of Charity, surely the opulent Syamantaka Jewel was left in your care by Shatta Dhanva, and is still with you. Indeed, we have known this all along. Notice he's not scolding him. See how he's speaking to him. Vishwanath writes, not only is Krishna, as Paramatma, the knower of all Atmas, but he is the knower of all Paramatmas in everyone's heart. Therefore, what is so remarkable if he knows Akura's heart? Smiling, Krishna said, you are not Satrajit's enemy. You did not steal the jewel. You are not greedy for wealth. You are the greatest devotee. Do I not know your mind? I know even the Paramatma in your mind. Why are you afraid of me? What can I ask you? I already know everything. Since Satrajit had no sons, his daughter's sons should receive his inheritance. They should pay for memorial offerings of water and pinda, clear their grandfather's outstanding debts, and keep the remainder of the inheritance for themselves. Krishna is suggesting. Nevertheless, the jewel should remain in your care, O trustworthy Akura, because no one else can keep it safely. But please, show the jewel just once, since my elder brother does not fully believe what I've told him about it. In this way, oh, most fortunate one, you will pacify my relatives. Everyone knows you have the jewel, for you now are continually performing sacrifices on altars of gold. Thus, shamed by Lord Krishna's conciliatory words, the son of Shwapalka, that's Akura, brought out the jewel from where he had concealed it in his clothing and gave it to the Lord. The brilliant gem shone like the sun. There's a very nice painting showing Akura giving the jewel to Krishna. Prabhupada writes in Krishna book, we can see in this chapter how a valuable jewel caused so much intrigue, violence, and suffering. This is certainly a good lesson for those who desire a trouble-free spiritual life. Don't get greedy for the Syamantaka Jewel or other things that are worldly considered to be valuable. Beware. After the Almighty Lord had shown the Syamantaka Jewel to his relatives, thus dispelling the false accusations against him, he returned it to Akura. And commentary says, Krishna book, for the second time, doubts about the Lord's reputation, occasioned by the Syamantaka Jewel, are dispelled by the jewel itself. Indeed, for the second time, the Lord brought the jewel to Dwarka to establish his integrity there. And this amazing series of incidents demonstrates that even when Lord Krishna descends to this world, there is a tendency for his peers to criticize him. So if you get criticized, you're in good company. Prabhupada writes, the whole material world is infected by the fault-finding propensity. So it's certainly advised against for Vaishnavas to engage in that contaminated and contaminating behavior. Don't do that. There are many important teachings about don't do that. I'll repeat a couple of them at the end. So we're closing out the chapter. This narration, rich with descriptions of the prowess of Lord Sri Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of God, it removes sinful reactions, just to hear it, and bestows all auspiciousness. Anyone who recites, hears, or remembers it will drive away his own infamy and sins and attain peace. So maybe we should hear it again. Because we're all subject to these things in this world. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, it says part of the world. There's a place of duality where there's heat and cold, night and day, winter and summer season, honor and dishonor. And sometimes honor comes when it's not deserved. Sometimes dishonor comes when it's not deserved. And a wise person remains neutral towards, or indifferent towards, or not affected by duality. But Krishna is noble, and the reputation of a noble person is important. And so, just like Lord Ramachandra showed, when the reputation of the noble Ram was in question, he took some action. So being tolerant is one thing. Krishna didn't notice how he spoke to Akrura. He could have smashed him verbally or otherwise, just finished him. But, Akrura was, the misfortune that came to Akrura had to do with the mission that he was sent on by Kamsa and the curse of the gopis, and Krishna knew, so he wasn't holding against Akrura. He knew. Krishna was the one that was being criticized, not Akrura. The one that did the wrong thing was being honored. The one that didn't do the wrong thing was being criticized. Even in Dwarka. So here's some statements about the fault-finding propensity. It's a little personal story. My first introduction to Krishna consciousness was through literature, was through a book, a magazine. Well, actually, it was a second. A magazine given to me in the student union building at the school I went to by Borijan. And he gave me at that time, Back to Godhead magazine wasn't, full color and glossy and all that. It was prepared on a mimeograph machine, which you maybe have heard of, but it's like, has a cylinder and you crank the cylinder and it would make imprints like a hand-run printing press kind of thing. And then they got the pages and they stapled the pages together, and it was stapled Back to Godhead magazine. So that was the first Back to Godhead magazine I got. And I didn't know what it was, and but it came from Purijan, so I kept it. I was just carrying it around had a stack of books on top of a clipboard, so I put it on top of the clipboard in the stack of books and carried it around with me. Didn't read it. One day somebody saw the Back to Godhead magazine and pointed at the thing and said, "Oh no, you're not into that, are you?" And I didn't know what it meant, but it got my curiosity to read what was in that magazine. And the featured article in that magazine was an essay by Bhaktisiddhanta. And the title of the essay was only part of the essay, it wasn't the full thing. The Bhagavat is ontology and morphology. So I had to get a dictionary to look up what the title meant. And then I started reading the article. And, being a college kid, I would make notes and look things up and write in the margin and underline stuff. And 3 hours later, I finished that essay, or that published that part of it that was in the magazine. And time just flew by. I didn't even feel time passing. When you get close to something, it's like that. And my experience was two things. I didn't really understand what I had read, but I had some picture. And the other is I found my consciousness was in another place that I'd never experienced before. So from that moment, and to this day, a very high regard for Bhaktisiddhanta. It takes a lot to understand his language. But it's not just, the mystery of what's he trying to say, or what is he saying. Let me try to understand it. It's the spiritual potency of a pure devotee. So some time passed, and I was living in the Boston Temple, and Guru Das was visiting the Boston Temple, because at the time, the ISKCON press was all situated inside the temple. There's a temple and deity worship and regular, Hare Krishna temple, and ISKCON press, which later became BBT, but it was ISKCON press at that time. So he came to visit. And he had a stack of books. And I like books. So I asked him, can I take a look at your books? He said, sure. And the book on the top was a book by Bhaktisiddhanta. So I was like, wow, Bhaktisiddhanta. I opened up the book, and I've looked for this book since then, but I haven't been able to find it. But I didn't even get past the introductory page, kind of like foreword. Was most of the page was blank, just this little section in the beginning that said something like this. A Vaisnava is one who never finds fault in others, for by so doing, he's only finding fault within himself. Paragraph. Rather, a Vaishnava is one who always looks within and finds where there is need for further purification. This is the way of life of a Vaishnava. So I'll say it again. A Vaishnava never finds fault in others, for by so doing, he is only indicating the very same faults are there within himself. Supposing someone's a pure devotee. Prabhupada was a pure devotee. He didn't find fault. He could discern this from that, but he didn't find fault because his heart wasn't filled with the same contamination. Those who find fault is because their hearts are filled with that very same contamination. That's with that first line. So say it again. A Vaishnava is one who does not find fault in others, for by so doing, he's indicating his own heart. He used the word honeycombed. That's important. His own heart is honeycombed with the same fault. Paragraph. Rather, a Vaishnava is one who always looks within to see how my heart can be made clean and free from such faults. Anyway, fault finding is a big problem. And it especially when we have, maybe especially, but it becomes prominent in the association of devotees because we have some expectation. Devotees should be up here. And you start associating with devotees, and lo and behold, they're not up there as you thought they would be, should be, could be. There you see some other stuff that's not way up there. Don't associate with devotees, you don't see it. You associate with devotees and you may see it. So now what? What are you going to do? Well, if your heart is honeycombed with faults, you're going to find fault. This and this and this, and, the finger pointing. That's not. It's ill-advised. Rather, a Vaisnava is one who always looks within. And how can my heart become free from misgivings and shortcomings? And that's a Vaishnava. Now you could say that's rare, but that's what a Vaishnava is rare. That's what Vaishnavas do. So 2 chapters back to back, Krishna's the one who's having fingers pointed against him. And what does Krishna do? Stands by the truth. I mean, the behaviors are different in those 2 cases, but the essence is, in the end, the truth prevails. So don't be dishonest with yourself and don't be dishonest with others. Be honest with yourself and be honest with others and stand by that. And make your own heart pure. And if fingers are pointed towards you, you stand by the truth. You don't get into the retaliatory tit-for-tat program. Don't do that. Then you just got sucked into the whole of the material energy. Don't do that. It's your misfortune if you do that. Stay steadfast. This came up in our discussions earlier. Stay steadfast on the path of virtue. This came on Sunday afternoon. Remember that discussion? The lady was sitting over here to my right. I don't know her name. Just stay on the path of virtue. Abide by the truth. Okay, so there's the Syamantaka Jewel story. It's very attractive, charming story. I mean, there's a little intrigue involved in all this, but charming story and important practical lessons of life. And so for tomorrow, we're going to hear about the next 5 wives or queens that Krishna marries. But we're going to backtrack a little bit to get like the history filled in, because we heard about the marriage of Rukmini. We heard about her first son Pradyumna, and coming attractions, we're going to hear the first son of Jamabati, his second queen. But there's some time where Krishna's in Dwarka, and he's going to be marrying 5 more queens. But then there's some other events that are occurring back in Hastinapur. While Krishna's in Dwarka, there's events going on in Hastinapur, so we're going to hear some of that. And there's a little movement back and forth by Krishna, back and forth between Dwarka and Hastinapur. So we'll hear some more tomorrow. Let's see if there's some discussion. Krishna's pastimes are fascinating, yeah. The more you get into them, this is my experience, the more you get into them, it's filled with intrigue, and it's hard to put the puzzle pieces together. Because our acharyas don't. The Bhagavatam is not constructed in entirely chronological fashion. And so how does this fit together with that fit together? So that, that tendency of minds to try to see how it all fits together. But besides the exercises filled with intrigue, the topic is Krishna. So our curiosity propensities are being fully engaged, and the topic is Krishna, becoming purified. And then hearing them again, and hearing them again, and hearing them again, and hearing them again, and hearing them again. It reveals truths about life and about how we should live our lives in service to Krishna. It's really nice. Very, very natural process. Okay. See if there's some comments. Go back to them.
Maharaj, it's about fault finding. Just little more clarification.
Okay.
As at my stage, I feel like when I say some boundaries been crossed. So first always is that I feel hurt, or little anger, or not feeling feared, or that thing kind of the judgment comes in the heart.
Yeah. You're human.
So then try to work it on and try to take help and sort it out, the issues, second step come. But I'm just trying to understand where the line draw in judgment, fault finding versus when somebody's not honoring your boundaries, or showing in a different way where it's not appreciable. And
yeah, it's all muddy, isn't it? Here's another way you could ask this question. What's the boundary between discerning and fault finding? Because the emotion part is another component, but the emotion part can become settled if you're engaged in discerning as opposed to judging or fault finding. So discerning is you can see what's what. For example, here's this mode, here's that mode, here's this particular flavor of the mixture of modes, and the modes are spiking. There goes this one, like watching fireworks on the 4th of July. Oh, there's that kind. And then, no, there's that kind. So it's just discerning without judging. The judging is, it suits my attitude, or it suits my liking or not liking. I like it, I don't like it. And it can be directed, if it's something hurtful, it can be directed towards others as well as towards oneself. And you don't like it. It doesn't mean, so liking, that's an emotion. So what is it? It's a mode of nature, flaring. And then, so that's discerning in a place of detachment. And then once that what it is identified, then the next step is what is the appropriate action. If you don't do the discerning part and then the evaluating what's the appropriate action, you're being swept away by the waves of the material energy and tossed around, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes sideways. It makes you seasick because that's due to the attachment, the attachment to the misconception, and then what goes along with misconception. Honor and dishonor, like Krishna says. Sometimes one is honored, sometimes one. So that's due to attachment. And the advice that Krishna gives is be detached. If you're going to be detached, you got to be attached to something. If you're detached from asat, then be attached to sat. You've heard me say this hundreds of times. You practice going to sat, that which is eternal, that which is reality, with a capital R. And from that position, you can discern. And from that position, you can then brainstorm what are some options. And then you can start selecting the wiser of the, eliminating some of the options and selecting ones that are appropriate. And then moving. And the star that you're following is Krishna is to be pleased. Or a little bit lower, let me act in a virtuous way, in a way that's in accord with theistic conduct. And that rules out other things. It doesn't like take a dagger and stab to death emotion. It's not like make you become an emotionless blob or something. But that tendency for feeling go towards what's going to be pleasing to Krishna. And you just practice it and practice it. A million times practice it. That is to say, bhakti is innate within the soul. Like walking propensity is there within a child. So however many times a child stumbles, they keep practicing and practicing, and the walking propensity comes out, and the next thing you know, the child's running around all over the place. But the walking propensity is innate, unless there's some malfunction of the body, muscle structure or something. So bhakti is innate within the soul. And just practice and practice. Follow the path and just keep practicing. However many times, that's however many times. And then when you find yourself, I did it again, you get up and you start walking. Because its propensity is there. The bhakti is inherent in the jiva. Very important. Some people doubt it. Bhakti is inherent in the jiva. So, back to your question. The dividing line between fault finding and discerning is, are you seeing as Krishna sees? Because Krishna makes comments about modes of nature. He's neutral. The mode of goodness is better. The mode of ignorance is darker. He's discerning, but he's not judging. He's discerning. And he's encouraging Arjuna, encouraging us, encouraging everyone to go direction of the mode of goodness and higher to the platform of bhakti. That's what Krishna does. So if we try to see as Krishna sees, that's jnana chakshusha or shastra chakshusha, and that's discerning. And then depending upon what's what, then you can start making your options of what's appropriate, what's going to be effective, what seems to be most suited according to my nature, and what I can understand. You consult those who are wise, if it depends on the circumstance and the situation. And then you move, as we heard on Sunday afternoon, on the path of virtue. You just abide by, what I've been saying is you abide by the truth, or you abide by virtue. And you live your life that way. And you live your life that way, and you live your life that way, and it becomes a virtuous life. And then the duality is going to continue. It's still going to be summer and winter season. It's still going to be happiness and distress. There's still going to be honor and dishonor. It's still going to go on. It's a place of duality. That's what the place is. But your consciousness becomes more fixed. By practicing, you can say, the path of Bhagavad Gita, or the path of virtue or the path of bhakti, and however many times you get knocked over, you get back up again, and you cultivate that bhakti life. In the with discernment, not with fault finding, but with the discernment, in the association of like-minded persons who you find are wholesome, and you want to be wholesome, so you associate with those wholesome, and be in the mood of service towards everyone else, while duality is going on, sometimes and sometimes. The emotions, two things. The darker emotions subside when consciousness becomes higher. You don't have to wrestle with those emotions if your consciousness is higher, because when your consciousness is higher, you can look at those emotions and you can redirect those emotions. They shrink. Or say it negatively, if your consciousness is lower, they consume you. They take over. So go for higher consciousness. And then you can manage those emotions better. And they eventually just subside. They're still there. You stub your toe and it hurts. Or life throws rocks at you and it hurts. But if your consciousness is higher, then you can look at the rock and look at the hurt and go, what's really important to me? Because this duality thing is going to keep going on. Is that what's important to me? I get less of that and more of this, and that's what's important to me? Or is being closer to Krishna what's important? And if you make that choice, that selection, that conscious free will choice, Krishna helps. He raises your consciousness. He deals with the difficulties in ways that are far better than we can. It's pretty amazing. So tolerance is big good quality for a devotee. You tolerate the duality. You just see it for what it is. It's just duality. It's here today, and after some number of days, maybe not gone tomorrow, but after some number of days, the duality is going to change. It's going to become something else, and then it's going to become something else. And my happiness is not what's the configuration of duality today. If that's the case, then one is going to be swept away by the emotions of the moment. Like the piece of wood on the waves of an ocean, up and down, and around and swirl around. And the Bhagavatam's example is like clumps of seaweed pulled by the waves, and they bring those clumps of seaweed together, and then they separate them, and it's just the movement of the waves. It's going to keep going on. So now what am I going to do about that? The human form of life is to go above that. That's the opportunity, at least. And otherwise one stays down in whatever, lower consciousness or animal, less than human consciousness. And that's not a nice place to be. Something else? Front? Okay.
Maharaj, thank you for the nice explanation.
Keep talking. If you don't talk, we won't be able to hear you.
How to see the difference, like discerning or judgment. So I was thinking about sometimes, you meet a lot of devotees, and the devotees are in the different stages of their practice. As sometimes they don't know
Your poor husband is so like in anxiety over here because is it the battery?
The wireless thing doesn't work properly.
Oh, mystery solved. It happens regularly in your home, though, I've noticed. Because you always have to revert. Go ahead, take them. You always have to revert to the one with the cable. It's like standard procedure in your home. Go ahead. You got the real one now. Try again.
Thank you. Harika. So we meet a lot of different devotees, and they are in the different stages of their practice.
Yes.
So sometimes they make a judgment, and we know that it is because of, as you mentioned, that it happens with sometimes. So
Yes.
we have to be in the higher conscious to get out of the emotions that we go through. Because they can find fault you or dishonor you by talking something. So all this happens. So how to, go to the higher conscious and disregard the emotions, but still, as you mentioned, it's still there. Sometimes it comes within you. How to tackle that type of emotion sometimes which pops in. Though I understand that higher conscious, it
You're
helps
repeating.
really.
I got the question. You're repeating the question. It's practice. Abhyasa, yoga. So if you need a path, and you follow the path. What the first point in that path, titiksha. The negative is you get absorbed in. The first point, the first instruction Krishna gives is you tolerate. And when you're in something that will help you to tolerate is you see it for what it is. It's temporary. It's asat. Today, it's this. Wait a while. This becomes that. Wait a while, that becomes yet something else. Knowledge is an asset for tolerance. That's Bhagavad Gita. It's a book of knowledge. So it teaches us. That's a starting point. Then you don't just stay in the starting point. You have to keep going. Read Bhagavad Gita and you keep going. What happens after you tolerate? You learn who you really are, and then once you learn who you really are, then you go the next step, at least that notionally, conceptually who you really are, is learn how to become detached from the fruits of your work. It's small and it's big. It's easy to say it, and it's another thing to do it. But when you become, you, or me, or any one of us, become detached from the fruits of our work, what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? We work as we're obligated. We have a sense of duty. And then there's different ideas of what's the sense of duty. And as that sense of duty becomes more prominent, I tolerate the heat and the cold, the honor and dishonor, the pleasure and the pain, because I have a duty to perform. And then that leads more towards mode of goodness, because that's a symptom of goodness, is you act dutifully. It's not pure goodness yet, but it's more in the direction of goodness than in the direction of being tossed by ignorance and passion. When something hits and it hurts, life throws rocks at you and it hurts. That's your question. Putting in, really, it's very simple language. What do you do? How do you handle it? You go back to Bhagavad Gita. You tolerate, you cultivate bhakti. According to what's suited for your stage, you cultivate bhakti. And you keep moving. And at a more mature stage than the beginning stage, you not only can see things for what they are, but you're very keen on not just, hey, I don't like this bad consciousness stuff, I want the good consciousness, high consciousness stuff. There's actually some attachment for the service and the object of the service. And so you do those, you or I or any one of us, do those things that help us stay immersed in Krishna thought. Like that little example that I gave of reading that Bhaktisiddhanta article. Time just went by, and it wasn't just because it was high language. I was used to reading high language stuff from college in a pre-med, da-da-da-da-da. So it wasn't because it was high level. It was pure. So you do those things that you experience purity by absorption. And then those negative emotions, they just, where'd they go? They may come back when you stop. But they're in a different perspective now. And just you cultivate a lifestyle like that.
Thank you, Maharaj.
The world continues being what it is. Even great souls undergo hardship. Just hearing Prabhupada explaining like this. Sadhus know that they're going to be, insults will be hurled towards them. Because they're sadhu in a place where people are sadhu. So they criticize. What to speak of little people like us?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Go towards Krishna in ways that you know it's going to lead me to Krishna. And I feel that Krishna connection. You know, some of the persons in this room, it's kirtan. They just love kirtan. They can sit down and have kirtan, and the world can stop, and it's okay because they're in kirtan, and you know, etc., etc. Find those things, combinations of things that make your Krishna connection strong. Study carefully and apply the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam gradually, so you have the orientation, how to navigate through the turmoil of life. Someone who has the microphone. Oh, okay.
There's an online question.
Oh, there is.
This question is from Sham Gopika Mataji. How should we react if someone tries to corner us deliberately and purposefully tries to create trouble for us? Should we just tolerate it, or how should we behave?
Show your fangs and growl. Let me respond by saying, don't react. How to react? Don't react. What do I do? Respond, not react. What does that mean? No, tolerate just means you hit the brake pedal with the absorption and duality. Tolerate doesn't mean you just continue to be a human punching bag. Tolerate means you don't get absorbed in the duality. What do? You go into a mode of goodness space. Because you did the tolerate, and then you go into a mode of goodness space. And you reflect. What's happening here? Following Bhaktisiddhanta's language, you look inside yourself. Why am I agitated? What's going on in here? Not what's going on out there. What's going on in here? And what do I need to do to make this clean? Then when you're moving in that direction, you'll have much more clarity about what are your options in dealing with what's out there. You don't do that, and you're all absorbed in duality. You're stuck. You got sucker punched. You know what that means? Sham Gopika probably doesn't know. You know, you go like you're going to hit them over here, and you actually hit them over there. And they want to hit you there, but they went like, so you paid attention over there. You got sucker punched. That's material energy. She knows how to get you. She knows our weaknesses better than anybody, and she knows how to capture us. So, don't become a sucker. Don't fall prey to the allurements of honor, dishonor. Either way, because they're both allurements. They're both Maya's allurements to absorb you in the material energy. So that's the tolerate. You step back from the duality thing. So don't react, but reflect. What's happening here? Look inside. What's going on? Why am I disturbed? What's inside here that's caused? Because if my heart was clean, I wouldn't be disturbed. I could see what's going on. I wouldn't be disturbed. I would then when you're not disturbed, and you know you're more clean, then you have a better sense of what your options are. A nice example that's coming to mind as when Rupa Goswami was approached by a Digvijay Pandit in Vrindavan. There's a long story, but it's short because of time. He wanted to challenge Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami understood this man isn't interested in truth. He's interested in debate. He's interested in feisty exchange. So he said to the man, "Oh, you're so learned. There's no debate here. You'll defeat me. I'm not going to engage in debate with you. Then you sign. Okay, here, I'll sign. You defeated me." He didn't get angry at the man or, point fingers at him and say, "You rascal, da-da-da-da-da-da. You'll never reach the truth by this method. Why are you wasting your time?" He didn't do that. I mean, he could have done that, but he didn't do that. So, your choices become more clear, and then your capacity to make the right choice becomes even more clear as the heart is pure. So first business is make the heart pure. When there's stuff going on out there, try to make your heart pure. And just make that your life project for a while. And then when your heart is pure, then you'll have a better sense of how to deal with the duality thing effectively. Something else? Behind you.
Just to say, sometimes our unconscious mind immediately react, and then we start thinking about it. Means we require more pure heart.
Well, you have to practice abhyasa. Abhyasa, just practice. There's conditioned. Prabhupada's explanation, I like it. You practice something, it becomes second nature. Nature is conditioning. Second nature is practice and becomes your nature. So you practice going into reflective space and not going into reactive. Just practice. It becomes practice and practice and practice. It becomes second nature. The mode of goodness comes by cultivation or practice. And associate with those that are in the mode of goodness and frame your life in ways that are mode of goodness, like cleanliness and regulation and so, etc. Frame your life in the quality of goodness, and then you can be more reflective instead of reactive, even when harsh things come. You can still see that they're harsh things, but you don't react. Wow, that was really interesting. Oh, there goes another one. Okay. Over there? Oh, you have something. Okay, just two more, we're going to end.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Satrajit was regretful and repenting for his offense to Krishna, and he rectified it by giving back Jewel and his daughter, but he still had a death punishment.
Oh, you're painting a very rosy picture. He was attached. He made amends because he wanted to protect his backside. He wasn't regretful. He just didn't want to get, all the citizens of Dwarka jumping on him. So he did what he thought would help him get free from that reaction from the citizens. It wasn't his heart.
Thank you.
Krishna Maharaj. So when Krishna killed the murderer and he come back to Satyabhama and told that I have killed the murderer but I could not find the jewel. So a little bewildered because the situation is very grief, like Satyabhama's father is killed and there is a lot of pain and sorrow there. What was the reason of mentioning about jewel there? It's not important at the time.
Well, there's not a lot of verses in that connection. It's just, was it Shatta Dhanva? It was Shatta Dhanva who killed his father, but the issue of killing his father was connected with the jewel. They couldn't find the jewel. So there's more to be done here. That's all. I mean, it's not loaded, tricky something. I have to find that jewel. Okay. I think we're going to end. Srila Prabhupada ki.